Okay, you want to know what it feels like to finally stand up for yourself after a lifetime of being told you're not good enough. To look your abuser straight in the eye and watch their world crumble. Because I got to experience that. And let me tell you, the champagne at my sister's engagement party tasted absolutely divine that night. My mom had just finished mocking me, again. "You'll never see a penny," she sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've always let us down." But this time, something was different. This time, I just took a slow sip of my ridiculously expensive champagne, Crystal, probably because my mother, Patricia Hartwell, always had a flair for showing off the wealth that came from my father's pharmaceutical company, a business she'd inherited after his death 3 years ago, despite having zero involvement in building it. I swallowed, meeting her icy gaze. "That's okay," I said, my voice calm, almost serene. "I only came to say goodbye. I'm leaving the country. Forever." The entire room went silent. You could literally hear a pin drop. And in that moment, all I could think was, finally. I stood near the marble fireplace, surveying the sprawling living room that used to be my childhood home. My mom had redecorated everything, erasing any trace of Dad's warm, comfortable style. Now it was all cold, modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, not a place people actually lived. My sister, Victoria, held court near the grand piano, her engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandelier. She was marrying Preston Montgomery III, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Boston. Everyone congratulated her, fawned over her, treated her like visiting royalty. And me? I was 28 years old and utterly invisible. "Mary, is that you?" Aunt Caroline spotted me, waving her wine glass. "I almost didn't recognize you. Are you still doing that little teaching thing?" That little teaching thing was my career as a high school English teacher, a path I'd chosen over joining the family business. It had been my first major disappointment to my mother. "Still teaching?" she pressed. "Yes," I replied, a tight smile plastered across my face. "How quaint," she said, already looking past me for someone more interesting. My invitation to Victoria's engagement party had come via a group text, not the embossed cards everyone else received. Victoria's engagement party, Saturday at 7. Try to look presentable. My mother, in a designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, hadn't even acknowledged my arrival beyond a brief nod. I watched Victoria show off her enormous ring. We'd been close once, when we were kids. I was 4 years older, and I used to help her with homework, defend her from bullies, sneak her cookies. But somewhere around her sophomore year of college, she shifted. She started seeing me the way Mom did, as the daughter who chose wrong, who picked passion over profit, who let the family down by being ordinary. "The shrimp puffs are divine," my cousin Jason said, appearing beside me. He was one of the few family members who still treated me like a human being. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Only to the people who know you," he chuckled, glancing around. "This is pretty over the top, even for Aunt Patricia. Victoria's marrying into Boston royalty. Mom's in her element." He studied my face. "You okay? You seem different tonight. Calmer, maybe." He had no idea how right he was. Just 3 months ago, I'd been utterly broke. Not just getting by broke, but legitimately can't pay rent broke. My apartment building had a pipe burst, flooding my unit and destroying most of what I owned. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. I needed a new laptop for work, new clothes, a deposit on a new place. My savings evaporated overnight. I swallowed my pride, a bitter pill, and called my mother. "I need to borrow $5,000, I'd said, hating every single word. "Just temporarily. I'll pay you back." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "You want money from me?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't an emergency. The flood destroyed. You made your choice, Mary," She cut me off. You wanted to be independent, to follow your own path. Teachers don't make much money, do they? Maybe you should have thought about that before rejecting everything your father built. I pushed back. Dad supported my decision to teach. She scoffed. Your father was too soft on you. He let you throw away your future. I stood in my friend Melissa's living room, where I'd been crashing on the couch, my face burning with humiliation. I'm asking for a loan, not a handout. I'll sign whatever paperwork you want. But she wouldn't budge. The answer is no, Mary. You're nearly 30 years old. It's time you learn to live with the consequences of your decisions. And then, she hung up. I cried for an hour. Just absolutely sobbed. Then I pulled myself together, borrowed money from my teacher's credit union at a brutal interest rate, worked summer school, tutored on weekends, picked up every extra duty I could. The debt felt crushing, suffocating, but I managed it. Then, 6 weeks ago, something extraordinary happened. My phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, an unknown number. Is this Mary Hartwell? A man's voice, professional and slightly nervous. Speaking. My name is Douglas Chen. I'm an attorney with Morrison Chen and Associates. I'm calling about your father, Richard Hartwell. My stomach dropped. My father passed away 3 years ago. Yes, I'm aware, Miss Hartwell. I apologize for the early call, but I've been trying to locate you for some time. Your father left something for you. Are you available to meet? I met him that afternoon. Douglas Chen was a slight man in his 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He opened a file. Your father came to see me about 6 months before his death, he began. He wanted to create a separate trust, independent of his will and hidden from his primary estate. He was very specific about the terms. I just stared at him, completely confused. I don't understand. My mother inherited everything. Your mother inherited the business, the house, the primary assets. Yes, he clarified. But your father had been setting aside money privately for years. He called it his insurance policy. He didn't trust your mother's judgment when it came to finances. Or, forgive me for being blunt, when it came to you. He slid a document across the desk. This trust was designed to mature 3 years after his death. He wanted to give your mother time to do right by you on her own. If she did, you'd receive this as a bonus. If she didn't... He paused, his gaze softening. He told me he hoped he was wrong about her, but he wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of either way. The number on the page made my vision swim. $2 million. There's a property as well, Douglas continued. A lake house in New Hampshire that he purchased through a separate LLC. It's fully paid off, in your name. He bought it as an investment property 15 years ago, but it was always meant for you. I sat there in a daze, unable to process what I was hearing. They are conditions, Douglas explained. You can't tell your mother or sister about this inheritance. If you do, the money reverts to charity. Your father was very clear. This is yours alone, and he didn't want them trying to claim it or manipulate you into sharing it. The trust has been generating investment returns for 3 years now. With those returns, the total is actually closer to $2.4 million. I drove back to my tiny apartment in a haze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The traffic lights blurred together as I processed it all. $2.4 million. A lake house. My father's secret insurance policy against the family he loved but didn't entirely trust. When I finally made it home, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just breathing. The apartment building looked different, less permanent. The cracked sidewalk, the faded paint on the door, the mailboxes with their rusted hinges, all of it suddenly felt temporary, like a waiting room I'd been sitting in without realizing I had somewhere else to go. Inside, I made tea with shaking hands. The mug was chipped, a thrift store find from my first year teaching. Everything I owned had a story like that. Purchased on sale, borrowed from friends, grateful hand-me-downs. I'd built a life on a teacher's salary, learned to make do, found dignity in frugality. But underneath it all, there had always been this quiet shame, this feeling that I should want more, be more, achieve more. My mother's voice lived in my head like an unwelcome tenant, commenting on everything. The apartment was too small, my car too old, my clothes off-brand, my career a dead end. Her disappointment had become the background noise of my existence, so constant I'd almost stopped hearing it. But Dad had heard it. He'd seen what it was doing to me. That night, I pulled out the box of my father's belongings I'd kept. Things Mom had let me take before she cleared out his office. She'd given me 1 hour to go through his things, hovering in the doorway the entire time like I might steal something valuable. I grabbed what I could, letters he'd written to me, birthday cards, a few photos, and a leather journal I'd seen him writing in sometimes. I'd never read it before. It felt too private, too much like trespassing. But now, sitting on my worn couch with tea cooling beside me, I opened it with trembling fingers. The first entry was dated 15 years ago, right after I'd started high school. Mary came home excited today about her English class. She wants to be a writer, maybe a teacher. Patricia rolled her eyes and said those weren't real careers. I told Mary the first thought teaching was noble work. Patricia didn't speak to me at dinner. I turned pages, reading entries that spanned years. Dad had documented everything. Every argument with Mom about my future, every time she'd criticized my choices, every moment she'd compared me unfavorably to Victoria. But he'd also written about me, about conversations we'd had, about my dreams and fears, the person I was becoming. One entry from my senior year of high school stood out. Mary told Patricia today that she wants to teach English. Patricia laughed in her face and said, "Teachers are failed people who couldn't do anything else." I watched Mary's light dim a little. I pulled her aside later and told her to follow her heart. Patricia didn't speak to me for 3 days. I'm setting up a separate account tomorrow. If anything happens to me, Mary needs to know she was right to choose her own path. I won't let Patricia destroy her spirit. My vision blurred with tears. I remembered that day so clearly. I'd been 17, full of excitement, ready to tell my parents my college plans. Mom's laughter had cut through me like a blade. I'd felt foolish, small, naive for thinking teaching was a worthy goal. But Dad had found me later in my room. He'd sat on my bed and said, "Your mother doesn't understand that success isn't measured in dollar signs. Teaching is one of the most important jobs in the world. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I thought he was just being nice, just trying to make me feel better. I hadn't realized he was going to war for me behind the scenes, protecting my future in ways I couldn't see. Another entry, a month before his diagnosis. Patricia makes it clear daily that she thinks Mary is a disappointment. She compared her to Victoria again at dinner, listing all the ways Victoria is successful while Mary is wasting her potential. Mary just smiled and changed the subject. She's stronger than Patricia gives her credit for. I'm setting up the trust this week. The company is doing well. We just closed a major acquisition. I'm increasing the amount. Mary deserves security and freedom. She deserves to know that at least one parent sees her worth. I read late into the night, waking my way through years of entries. Dad had written about his own struggles, too. The pressure to be ruthless in business. Mom's growing obsession with social status. The slow erosion of their marriage into something cold and transactional. He'd written about staying for me and Victoria, about trying to model decency in a world that rewarded calculation. There was an entry from my college graduation, watched Mary receive her diploma today. English education, magna cum laude. She glowed on that stage. Patricia spent the whole ceremony on her phone managing some business crisis that probably could have waited. On the drive home, Patricia said, "Well, that's 4 years and $80,000 down the drain." I wanted to defend Mary, but she'd already learned to let Patricia's comments slide off her. Maybe that's worse, that she's had to develop armor against her own mother. And then, one from my first year teaching, Mary called tonight, excited about a student who finally understood. To Kill a Mockingbird after struggling all semester. Patricia was in the room, heard me on the phone, and after I hung up, she said, "She sounds like a child. Victoria closed $1 million deal this week, and Mary's celebrating a teenager reading a book." I went into my office and transferred another $50,000 into the trust. Mary will need it. Patricia will never see her clearly. The final entries were from the months before his death, when he knew he was dying. His handwriting had gotten shakier, the entries shorter, but they were all about making sure things were in order for me. Met with Douglas Chen again. The trust is locked down. 3-year waiting period to see if Patricia does right by Mary. I hope she does. I hope I'm wrong about her. But if I'm not, at least Mary will have options. At least she'll know one parent believed in her. Absolutely exhausted today. Harder to write now. Hands don't work right. Mary visited today. She sat with me for 3 hours, read me poetry. Dickinson, my favorite. Patricia stopped by for 20 minutes, mostly talked about the business. Mary is worth 10 of her. I wish I'd been braver. Wish I'd left Patricia years ago and raised the girls without her toxicity, but it's too late for that now. All I can do is make sure Mary knows she was loved exactly as she is. The last entry, dated 2 weeks before he died. Mary doesn't know this will be the last birthday card I write her. 25th birthday, quarter of a century. I wrote her a long message about being proud, about knowing she'll do beautiful things in this world. Patricia criticized the card for being too sentimental. Everything real is too sentimental for Patricia. But Mary cried when she read it, hugged me so tight. She whispered, "I love you, Dad." And I knew, regardless of everything else I got wrong in my life, I got Mary right. She's good and kind and brave. The money will help, but she doesn't need it to be extraordinary. She already is. I closed the journal and sobbed into my hands. Great, heaving cries that came from somewhere deep in my chest. Grief for my father, yes, but also relief. Profound, immense relief. Relief that I hadn't been crazy, that the dynamic I'd sensed in our family had been real. Relief that someone had seen me, truly seen me, and thought I was enough, exactly as I was. The next morning, I woke up with puffy eyes and a clarity I'd never felt before. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started researching international teaching positions. I spent the next month making quiet preparations. I applied for teaching positions internationally, targeting American schools abroad. My credentials were solid, my recommendations strong. Within 2 weeks, I had offers from 3 different schools. The Barcelona position stood out immediately. International School of Barcelona, established, well-funded, excellent reputation. They offered competitive salaries, housing assistance, professional development. The city itself had always fascinated me. I'd loved the language, the culture, the history since college. I'd watched documentaries about Barcelona's architecture, its beaches, its vibrant food scene, and thought wistfully about maybe visiting someday. Now, I could do more than visit. I could live there. I video interviewed with the principal, a warm woman named Carmen, who'd spent 20 years in international education. She asked thoughtful questions about my teaching philosophy, my experience with diverse learners, my adaptability. At the end, she smiled and said, "I think you'd be a wonderful fit for our community. The position is yours, if you want it." I accepted on the spot. Then came the logistics. I gave notice at my school, citing personal reasons and a unique opportunity abroad. My principal, Mrs. Henderson, was disappointed but supportive. "You're one of our best teachers," she'd said, "but I understand. Sometimes you need to take a leap." I started selling my furniture on Facebook Marketplace, keeping only what would fit in a few suitcases. My couch sold in a day. My bookshelf took longer. People asked if it came with the books, and I laughed and said, "No, those are coming with me to Spain." My bed, my kitchen table, my desk, all of it went to new owners. Melissa helped me sort through my belongings one Saturday. We sat on the floor of my increasingly empty apartment, surrounded by boxes marked donate, sell, and keep. "Are you scared?" she'd asked, folding one of my sweaters. "Terrified," I admitted, but also excited. More excited than scared. "I think your mom doesn't know." "No," I said, "and she won't. Not until I'm ready to tell her." Melissa studied my face. "What about Victoria's party?" "I'm going to go. One last appearance, then I'm done." "That's very dramatic." "I know," I said, "but I think I've earned a little drama." She laughed. "Fair enough. Just promise you'll video chat me constantly from Barcelona." I promised. I also met with Douglas Chen twice more to finalize everything. He helped me set up international bank accounts, explained tax implications of living abroad, connected me with a financial advisor specializing in expat situations. The trust money would be invested conservatively, generating steady returns. I'd live on my teaching salary in Barcelona and let the inheritance grow, a safety net I'd hopefully never need, but would always have. "Your father would be very happy right now," Douglas had said at our final meeting. "He wanted exactly this for you: freedom, security, and the courage to build the life you wanted." I thanked him, this stranger who had become the guardian of my father's final gift, and walked out of his office feeling lighter than I had in years. The weeks leading up to Victoria's party had a surreal quality. I was living in two realities simultaneously: the old Mary, going through the motions in Boston, and the future Mary, already mentally packing for Barcelona. I'd walk through my neighborhood and think, "I'll never see this coffee shop again." I'd drive past my school and think, "Someone else will teach in that classroom next year." Every day was a series of small goodbyes I was saying only to myself. I told my closest friends the truth, swearing them to secrecy. They'd thrown me a surprise farewell party 2 weeks before Victoria's engagement party, a quiet gathering at Melissa's apartment with wine, tapas, and a playlist of Spanish music. They gave me gifts: a Spanish phrase book, a guidebook to Barcelona, a journal. We talked late into the night about dreams and risks and the courage it takes to start over. "You're doing what all of us wish we could do," my friend Sarah had said. "You're just leaving, starting fresh. That's incredible." But I shook my head. "You could do it too. We all could. That's the thing I'm realizing. We trap ourselves with our own fear more than circumstances trap us." Now, standing at Victoria's engagement party with these weeks of secret preparation behind me, I felt calm, detached. I was already gone in every way that mattered. This was just the final scene, the closing credits, the moment before the screen went dark on this chapter of my life. I'd planned everything carefully. I'd move to Spain, settle in, use the money to build a real life. Maybe buy a small apartment near the beach, travel during school breaks, finally write the novel I'd been thinking about for years. The trust would give me security, but more than that, it would give me freedom from ever needing anything from my mother again. And I'd decided to attend Victoria's engagement party, one last appearance before I disappeared from their lives forever. Victoria materialized beside me, her smile bright and empty. "You came." "Of course. Congratulations." "Thanks." She held out her hand so I could admire the ring up close. It was enormous, probably 3 carats. Preston designed it himself. Well, he worked with a jeweler, but it was his vision. "It's beautiful. We're thinking a June wedding at the Fairmont. Mom's already planning it. It's going to be incredible." She paused, her expression shifting to something that might have been pity. "You should bring a date if you have one, or come alone." "That's fine, too." The casual cruelty was almost impressive. Victoria had mastered Mum's ability to insult you while smiling sweetly. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, my voice flat. She drifted away toward Preston, who stood with a group of men by the bar, laughing too loud at something that probably wasn't funny. I finished my champagne and grabbed another glass. The alcohol was helping, smoothing the edges of this final performance. "Mary!" My mother's voice cut across the room. She was beckoning me over to where she stood with a distinguished-looking couple. I recognized them as the Mitchells, old friends of my parents. I walked over, already knowing this wouldn't be pleasant. "The Mitchells were just asking about you," Mom said, her smile sharp. "I was telling them about your work." "Still teaching?" Mr. Mitchell asked kindly. "That's wonderful. We need good teachers." "She teaches high school English," Mom said, and somehow she made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. "It's very fulfilling," Mrs. Mitchell told me. "It is," I said evenly. "Though it doesn't pay much," Mom continued, taking a sip of her wine. "Teachers in public schools make what? $40,000? $50,000? I can never remember." "Patricia," Mrs. Mitchell said uncomfortably, "I'm just being realistic. Mary chose her path, and we all have to live with our choices." She turned to me, her eyes cold. "Speaking of which, how was your apartment situation? Did you ever find a stable living arrangement after that flood?" The room seemed to shrink. She was bringing up the moment I'd asked for help, the moment I'd been most vulnerable, as casual dinner conversation. "I'm fine, thanks. Are you?" She laughed lightly. "You always say you're fine, but I wonder. Teaching must be so stressful, and the money is just not there. Sometimes I think about your father, how disappointed he'd be that you never lived up to your potential." Something crystallized in my chest. This was it. This was the moment. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice steady, "I don't think Dad was disappointed at all." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh, and how would you know? You barely saw him the last year of his life. You were so busy with your career." The lie was breathtaking. I visited him in the hospital every single day. She'd been the one who'd spent his final months managing the business, leaving him alone except during visiting hours when other people could see her playing the devoted wife. "I know because he told me," I said quietly, multiple times. "He supported my decision to teach." "Your father was soft," she said, her voice sharp enough now that people nearby were starting to notice. "He enabled your mediocrity instead of pushing you to be better. If he'd been harder on you, maybe you wouldn't be struggling to make ends meet now." Mrs. Mitchell touched her husband's arm, starting to back away from the conversation. "I saw how you had to beg for money after your apartment flooded," Mom continued, her voice rising slightly. "Coming to me with your hand out like a child. You're almost 30 years old, Mary. When will you learn to stand on your own 2 feet? The room was quieting now, conversations dying as people turned to watch. "You know what really bothers me?" She was on a roll, her third glass of wine lowering her already minimal filter. "Your father left me this company, this house, everything. And you know why? Because he knew Victoria and I could handle it. We're strong. We're capable. But you." She laughed, and the sound was ugly. "You'll never see a penny of real money. You'll spend your whole life living paycheck to paycheck because you've always let us down. You've always been a disappointment." The silence was complete now. 30 people stood frozen, drinks halfway to mouths, watching this brutal public execution. I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the moment stretch. My hand was perfectly steady. "That's okay," I said, my voice calm and clear in the silent room. "I only came tonight to say goodbye. I'm leaving the country forever." My mother's face went blank with confusion. "What?" "I'm moving to Barcelona," I announced. "I start teaching at an international school there in September. I've already signed my contract, given notice at my school here, and sold most of my belongings." I smiled at her, and it felt genuine. "I'll be gone in 6 weeks, and I don't plan to come back." "You can't be serious," she said, but uncertainty flickered across her face. "You're just being dramatic." "I'm completely serious. I came tonight because it seemed like the polite thing to do, to say goodbye in person. But you're right about one thing. I will never see a penny from you, and I'm absolutely fine with that, because I don't need anything from you anymore. I haven't needed anything from you for a while now." Victoria had pushed through the crowd, Preston trailing behind her. Mary, what are you talking about? I'm talking about leaving all of this. The judgment, the comparisons, the constant reminders that I'm not good enough. I'm done with it. I'm going to spend my life in Spain, teaching kids who actually appreciate learning, living near the Mediterranean, and building a life that makes me happy instead of trying to meet standards that were designed for me to fail. Mum's face had gone from confusion to pure, unadulterated anger. This is ridiculous. You can't just leave. What about your responsibilities? What about family? What responsibilities? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping me. You've made it clear I'm not part of the family business. And as for family, I looked around the room at all the relatives and friends who'd watched me be belittled for years without saying a word. I don't think I'll miss this very much. You're being selfish. Mom hissed, her voice shaking slightly. After everything I've done for you. What have you done for me? The question came out harder than I'd intended. You told me I was throwing my life away when I chose to teach. You refused to help me when I was desperate. You spent years telling me I'm a disappointment. You've compared me to Victoria at every opportunity and found me lacking every single time. So, please tell me, what exactly have you done for me that I should be grateful for? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. I didn't come here to make a scene, I said, softer now. I really did just come to say goodbye. But since you brought up money, since you brought up Dad, since you decided to humiliate me one last time in front of everyone, I figured I might as well be honest. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back for visits. I'm not coming back for holidays. When I get on that plane to Barcelona, that's it. Mary, come on, Victoria said, but there was a note of panic in her voice now. You don't mean that. I do mean it. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but I'm done being the family disappointment. I'm done being the cautionary tale you use to make yourselves feel better. I found a job I love in a city I've always wanted to live in, and I'm taking it. You can't afford to just move to Spain. Mom grabbed for control. International moves cost money. You just said yourself you were broke a few months ago. I worked summer school. I tutored. I picked up extra shifts. I saved. All true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. And honestly, it's none of your business how I afford it. That's kind of the point. My life, my decisions, my business. Mr. Mitchell cleared his throat. Perhaps we should give you some privacy. No, please don't leave on my account, I said. I'm actually heading out myself. Victoria, congratulations again on your engagement. I hope you're very happy. I meant it. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and I remembered the kid she'd been before Mom had molded her into a younger version of herself. I turned to my mother. Goodbye, Mom. I hope you have a good life. I walked toward the door, and the crowd parted around me like water. My heels clicked against the marble floor. Behind me, I could hear the beginning of frantic conversations, Mom's voice rising as she tried to regain control of the situation. I stepped out into the warm June evening and pulled out my phone to call an Uber. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding through me. Mary, wait. I turned to see Jason jogging down the front steps. Are you really doing this? He asked. Yeah, I really am. He studied my face, then broke into a slow smile. Good for you. Seriously, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Or the stupidest, I quipped. Maybe both, but mostly brave. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number in Spain. When I visit Europe next year, I want to stop by. I rattled off my new email address. Reach out when you're planning the trip. I'd love to show you around. He hugged me quickly. Your dad would be really proud of you right now. You know that, right? My throat tightened. Thanks, Jason. My Uber arrived, and I slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the house, I looked back one time. I could see people gathered in the windows, silhouettes backlit by the chandelier light. My mother stood on the front steps, Victoria beside her, both of them staring after the car. I turned around and didn't look back again. The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind. I finished packing, said goodbye to friends, had a small farewell dinner with my teacher colleagues who had become my real family over the years. Melissa cried and made me promise to video chat every week. My principal, Mrs. Henderson, hugged me and said, "You're going to do amazing things." I flew to Barcelona on a Tuesday afternoon in late August. The trust money sat safely in my bank account, but I hadn't touched it yet, except to put a deposit on a modest apartment in the Gracia neighborhood. Douglas Chen had helped me set up international accounts, investment strategies, everything I needed to manage my unexpected inheritance responsibly. The lake house in New Hampshire remained empty for now, but I visited it once before leaving. It was beautiful, a small cabin with huge windows overlooking the water, surrounded by pine trees. Dad had chosen well. I'd hire a property manager, maybe rent it out in the summers. Someday, maybe I'd retire there. My new school was everything I'd hoped for. The students were engaged, multilingual, curious about the world. My colleagues were warm and welcoming. I taught American literature to sophomores and juniors, ran an after-school creative writing club, and spent my weekends exploring Barcelona's winding streets and sitting in cafes working on my novel. 3 months after I'd arrived, my phone rang. "Victoria." I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello, Mary." Her voice was thick, like she'd been crying. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "Mom had a health scare last week." "She's fine. She's okay, but it was scary. And when we were at the hospital, she kept saying she needed to talk to you. She kept saying she'd made a mistake." I walked to my apartment window and looked out at the Barcelona skyline, at the mountains in the distance. "Is she asking me to come home?" "She won't say it directly, but yeah, I think she is." "And Mary, I wanted to apologize. The way she talked to you at my party, the way I've treated you over the years, it wasn't okay. I've been thinking about it a lot since you left. You were right about everything." "What changed your mind?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Preston broke off the engagement. Last month." I sucked in a breath. "Victoria, I'm so sorry." "Don't be." He was controlling, condescending, exactly like Mom. Being around him made me realize I was turning into her, and I hated it. After he left, I started thinking about what you said about being happy instead of meeting everyone else's standards. And I realized you were right. You were always right. "What are you going to do?" "I'm taking a break from the family business. I'm thinking about going back to school, actually. I always wanted to study environmental science, but Mom said it wasn't practical. Turns out I don't really care what's practical anymore." A smile tugged at my lips. "Good for you. Will you come home? Just to visit. I mean, I miss you. And I think Mom misses you too, even if she can't say it." I looked around my small, sun-filled apartment, at my bookshelf full of Spanish novels I was slowly learning to read, at the photos on my wall from weekend trips to Valencia and Granada, at the life I was building, piece by piece, exactly the way I wanted it. I can't come home right now. School doesn't break until December, and I've made commitments here. But maybe I could visit at Christmas. Really, maybe. No promises. I paused, needing to be clear. "And Victoria, I need you to understand. I'm not coming back permanently. Spain is my home now. This is where I want to be." "I know," she said, a hint of sadness in her voice, but acceptance too. "I get it. I just want to see you. We all do, even if Mom can't admit it yet." After we hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time, thinking about my father, about how he'd seen all of this coming. The conflict, the breaking point, the need for me to build something independent of my mother's approval. He'd given me the tools to escape and the security to build something real. I might visit at Christmas. I might even forgive my mother someday, if she ever actually apologized. But I would do it from a position of strength, on my own terms, with a life I'd built myself waiting for me back in Barcelona. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "How's Spain treating you?" I typed back, "Like home." And it was true. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Dad's gift hadn't just been the money or the house. It had been the freedom to choose myself without fear, to walk away from people who made me feel small, and build a life that made me feel whole. I looked at the framed photo on my bookshelf, the last one taken of Dad and me together. He was smiling, arm around my shoulders, and I was laughing at something he'd just said. I could almost hear his voice. "Follow your heart, Mary. The rest will work itself out." He'd been right about that, too. I opened my laptop and pulled up the document I'd been working on. Chapter 7 of the novel I was finally writing. The story of a woman who learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of people who refuse to see your worth. And the greatest act of courage is building a life that makes you happy, even when it disappoints everyone else. It was fiction, mostly, but it had started with a kernel of truth. And that truth had set me free. So, what do you think? If you were in my shoes, after years of being put down, would you have done the same thing? Would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.